community can also understand, like having an objective is important. But above and beyond that, I think the thing that gives me the most reward out of achieving a certification is knowing that I have a set of skills and I have a set of capabilities that is at a particular baseline practitioner level in the industry. I know we talk about practitioner a lot in terms of the certification exams. It gives me confidence that I've seen the totality of this role and I have a good grasp of understanding all the nuances in the role. Maybe I don't know every feature of every product perfectly well, but I certainly have the foundation for discovering and being able to educate myself on what a cloud developer would be required to do on Google Cloud and how to actually improve my skills over time because I know the area of responsibility for a cloud developer. Now, I'm also a manager at the same time. And what I find rewarding there is that I don't get to use my developer skills as much as I would like because I have a team that I work with, and I also work pretty broadly on Google Cloud. So for me, certification is a way to make sure I continue to learn, I continue to develop, I continue to have a growth mindset and improving my core developer skills. I started as a developer and I want to continue to maintain those skills because I enjoy that part of my job. So certification gives me a way of measuring my success and ensuring that my developer skills are staying relevant and giving me the opportunity that when I have the chance to do developer oriented activities, that I'm prepared to do those.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And the last question for you, what value has being Google Cloud Certified had in your role at Google?
So in my role, I work with a lot of customers. I determine the scope of work. I help address technical problems. I help customers design technical solutions on the platform. So having certifications for me means that I have the confidence that as I'm talking to customer developers, I can be confident that I'm giving them best practices advice, that I'm positioning them for success, and that I'm able to do knowledge transfer and help them build the best solutions they can on Google Cloud. So with my team's goal really to accelerate a customer's journey on cloud, having certifications again gives me that confidence that I'm preparing my partners on the customer side to be successful and to be able to grow the small amount of the platform I've helped them develop and allow them and their organization to really flourish on Google Cloud. I'm giving them good, strong advice and good, strong foundational information that's backed up by the certification that I know that I'm positioning them for long-term success.
Thank you. Anything else that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
I mean, I am a big fan of certification. I've always done a lot of different certifications since I've been at Google and even prior. I started getting involved in some of the Google certifications. It makes me really proud to have the opportunity to be involved with the community, to reach out to other people in the certification community, give them advice, give them direction, help them understand the purpose and the objective of certification. I really enjoy that part of things, and I certainly hope that anyone that's listening is, if they're considering certification, that they have it within them to be able to do it. I've seen many people be able to study and pass the certifications. It does take some work, but I've found it pretty much universally rewarding across the people that I've sort of subjectively interviewed through the years. And something like Next, when we've had it in person, I've always spent a lot of time at our certification area just trying to collect feedback from other individuals so that we can continue to make the exams relevant and valuable to the community.
Thank you so much for the conversation today, Carl.
Great, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Carl. And now let's recap with some additional resources. First, watch on demand at any time. Please visit cloudonair.withgoogle.com for all of our hands-on learning, training, and demos from Google Cloud experts. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please visit cloudonair.withgoogle.com for more hands-on learning, training, and demos from Google Cloud experts, and see you next time.
Hello and welcome to week 9. This is Cloud on Air live webinars from Google Cloud. My name is Ricardo Andrade and I'm a technical trainer lead for Apigee. You are watching a hands-on lab session for our business application focused Cloud Study Jam. Coming up, we'll have a lab walkthrough using Quick Labs. You can ask questions at any time by submitting them in the box below this screen. We have Googlers on standby to answer them. Let's get started. This is our first lab for the quest this week, and will help you get started with Apigee, which is Google Cloud's API management platform. But first, what is an API management platform? Let's make sure we all have the same understanding before we begin. Let's start by going back a couple years. So to understand where we are, we need to first look into how we got here. And in order to do that, if we go back not too many years ago, you see that our definition of success was maybe having a website. That was our digital presence, so to speak. We had a website, maybe we're tracking success by number of visitors or number of clicks or number of new users registered to our site. This was relatively simple to maintain, to understand, and given that the pace was not as fast as what it is today, it was relatively simple for IT organizations to plan and execute and update their systems of record, given the demand that we had at the time. Fast forward a couple of years now, this is more what we see today. We have any number of different users expecting different experiences, demanding new services, and wanting to connect from different places, so to speak. So companies today operate pretty much on what's called a omni-channel. I may want to start a transaction on my cell phone, maybe go back home and continue from my computer, may want to interact other ways, potentially even via the call center. We have a much fast pace today from our single website from before. Furthermore, our systems on the backend, our systems of record, they have also been evolving little by little organically. And today, the configuration that we have, it's not as simple as what it used to be. And if we try to actually maintain everything and connect everything to everything, the scenario that we ended up with, it's something similar to this diagram. If you try to connect every single type of experience to every single system that we have on the back end, we ended up with this kind of spaghetti diagram. The demands from our users today, they are in days. Let's say there's a new product that's being released in the market. I expect to be able to connect to your company services using that product in a fraction of days. For example, when assistants started to come out, either Google Assistant, Alexa, Siri, they don't really have any information about your bank account. They're connecting somewhere. And if I want to check my balance or check the weather, how's the weather today? That information needs to come from somewhere. That somewhere is typically a system of record from some company somewhere, right? And that service that we're using is just one more way, one new, what we have on the diagram, connected digital experience. Our users, they expect that they will have access to their information or information that your company provides in a matter of days. On the other side of this diagram here, if you look at the bottom, the speed that we can operate, the speed that the IT departments can typically operate, they're not in days, they are in years. It takes a while for us to be able to deploy a new system, for us to be able to migrate a database or upgrade an existing one. Maybe sometimes it's just a matter of upgrading the version of the software. It is a tedious and dangerous sometimes process. So we have this gap, this disparity in what our users want, what our companies can provide, and we are operating at different speeds. This is what's called the two-speed IT approach sometimes as well. And the main problem, if you look in the middle of the diagram there, for every interaction that we have, every new experience that we want to give to our users, we need to be able to provide that in a secure way. We need to be able to scale to the level that we have the demand today. We need to be able to manage, understand, and analyze what's happening on the system. And everything that we do today, we need to be able to connect to the future, basically, right? We need to somehow future-proof our solutions so we don't end up with a solution, with a diagram that we have here on the screen right now. This is very tedious, very costly to maintain a system like this. If we make a change on our, let's say, security system or even our analytics, we'll have to look into all those different lines going across from the top to the bottom and vice versa, and update every single one of them if we keep on operating this way. So this is where the API management platform comes into play. You'll sit in the middle. It sits, if you look from an architecture perspective, it is something that's creating this interface, as the name API implies. It is an interface between our users and our, let's say, data. I'll just generalize to the data in general. Usually we'll be serving services and data from our backend, but more importantly, it allows you to offer now the new services, the new experiences to your users in a matter of days. That is the expectation that the users have. At the same time, protecting our data in the backend and allowing our backend to evolve at its own pace. So we're the number one thing that we're gaining here is this level of abstraction, and we're decoupling the users from our backend systems. Any transformation, any security, scaling up, traffic management, analytics, all the different, let's say, requirements that we had from before, they are done now at this API management layer. This means that if we want to change a database or remove some service from our backend, let's say we're taking some monolithic application and creating microservices, we can do that without actually impacting the end users. Our end users will be talking to the same API on the API layer, and we can make any translations or conversions, transformations, whatever you want to call it, on the API layer on our API management platform in order to talk the new, let's say, protocol or the new API into our backend. So it truly allows us to connect those two sides with the freedom that we need to operate at different speeds, at different pace, on both sides, from the customer perspective and from our IT department perspective. And at the same time, offering all the benefits of securing, analyzing, doing audits, and everything that needs to be done, scaling up at the API management layer. So with that, let's start looking into the tool itself. Like we started saying, all the labs that we have for this quest, they are hosted on Quick Labs. And the way that you'll be getting access to the session today is by going to the link on the screen, goo.gle/ch-next. And from there, for week 9, you'll see lab 1. This is the lab that we're doing on this walkthrough here. It is part of Cloud Hero. So this is the first lab of the whole quest. You'll be landing on the Cloud Hero page, and from there you can select the lab that will be doing the walkthrough right now. If you want, you can, and I'd recommend you complete all 6 labs that we have for this quest. You will not only get the you not only get the knowledge and the, in my view, the fun of playing with the tool at no cost. This is all part of the Quick Labs platform. There will be no cost to you to use either Google Cloud or RPG this week. And you also get a chance to win prizes. So again, this is week 9. And once you get there to Cloud Hero, select week 9, make sure you go into our lab 1. You then, if you don't yet have an account on Quick Labs, you have to create an account. And for the labs, we typically recommend, once you are already in Quick Labs, we recommend that you open a private or incognito window for you to run the labs. Quick Labs will be creating all the environment that you need for Google Cloud, and that means that it will be generating credentials for you to use. Just now for the lab for Apigee, I'll walk you through the process in a little bit. We'll be using trial accounts, and that account you get to keep. So once you register for a trial account for Apigee, you have that for I believe 30 days, and you get to keep it after this lab here. For Quick Labs, once the lab is done, the account gets removed. Basically, everything that you build on a traditional Quick Labs or GCP account provisioned by Quick Labs, that gets deleted after you're done with your lab. But with Apigee, you get to keep it. You get to use it a little longer. Back to the Cloud Hero format, it is a game, right? The idea is that you are running your lab. You can run the lab a couple times. I believe it's 5 times. And that means that every time you complete the lab, we are looking into how well you did it and how fast you completed the lab to gain points. And the more points you accumulate throughout all 6 labs in this quest, the higher up on the leaderboard you're going to be. And again, this is for everybody that's participating on this week, not only for you folks on this session. We have the Cloud Hero session open to anyone that's willing to participate. You're taking advantage of this walkthrough lab here, but you are competing as a group, basically. Everybody on this session, plus people outside that they're not joining this session today, they're also competing on Cloud Hero this week. So with that, let me get started. I'll switch here real quick. You should by now have already got access to Quick Labs. I'll show you how to navigate to the lab. Let me just switch tabs real quick here. Once you get to Quick Labs, this is what you see for week 9. Make sure you are on the correct week. And the lab itself, you may not have this expanded yet. You may have to expand to see all the labs. We are on the introducing API management on top of a legacy platform lab today. Like I said, we do have other labs here. I encourage you to complete them all. They are all very descriptive. It will help you to complete the labs on a step-by-step. And on this session, I'm walking you through the very first one. Once you get into the lab, once you click on the first lab there, just for a second, don't click yet on Start Lab. Let me just show you a little bit further down here. We can get more information about the lab before we have our timer running there. And we even say so a little down here before you click the Start Lab button, right? So, and the main thing that I wanted to show you is that we do have some instructions here at the beginning, but given that we are using a, let's say an external or a trial account for Apigee, one of the requirements that we have here is for you to create your own Apigee account. And I'll get back to the top there in a little bit. But for now, if you don't yet have an account on Apigee, I highly recommend if you want to do the lab, actually you will have to have an account with Apigee. So go to the this link here, sign up for an account. It is free. So let me open this in a new tab. All we're getting is your name and email address. Not much more than that. If you already have an account, you can simply log in, but also if you simply go to apigee.com, I'm already logged in, so let me sign out for a moment here. And if you simply go to apigee.com, we always have the link here to try for free. It may be a little cut right now from the window. Let me just move this slightly. So you have the option to sign up from the web page for Apigee here. It takes you to cloud.google.com/apigee, and then from there you can either sign in or you can do the setup or the registration. I already have my Apigee account created here, so let me just briefly show you what it looks like. And I'll have to log in again here. So once you have your account, you'll be seeing something similar to this. Obviously, you'll be your own name, the name of your organization here. But just a few things, quick navigation kind of overview. We have options on the left here to develop, to publish, and then analyze reports basically, and then some configurations. We'll play with some of these options throughout the lab here. For now, the one that we'll be using at first, you'll be mostly focused on the proxy. There may be already, like in this case here, this account I just created, you may already have something configured in here. Just bring this in a little more. But you don't need to worry about what's already in here. And the other place we'll be playing with in the lab is on our extensions or integrations with GCP, and the lab will walk us through this as well. Going back into our lab configuration here, the other thing we may need is a REST client. It doesn't need to be this one here. I'll just click on this, have it open. Let me make sure I open on a new tab, just so it's ready for me to use when I need it. We'll be using this later on in the lab itself. So I'm just queuing up a few tabs here, having them ready for us before we click on the Start Lab. Now coming back here, just walk you through the traditional Quick Labs format if you haven't done yet. Quick Labs will actually be provisioning a new Google Cloud account for you. The Apigee account, like I just showed, you have to go in and register directly on our website if you don't have an account yet. And if you do, it's just a matter of signing in, no big deal there. But for Google Cloud, because Apigee is not yet fully integrated on the console, we do it outside. But for everything else I'll be doing for the lab today, once you click on Start Lab, Quick Labs will actually be provisioning a new account, and the credentials will look like something similar to what we have on the screen here right now. And you ask you to sign in into the console, into Google Cloud. Now, this is one of the places that I highly recommend that you use incognito or a private window. And the reason is that if you are already signed into Quick Labs with your, let's say, Gmail or your own Google account, There could be cases where you have credentials conflict. Basically, the credentials generated by Quick Labs will try to take over your own login for Quick Labs, for example. So opening into a incognito is probably the safest way to do it. Or you have the option to select the option down here, the use another account. I particularly don't like this option because it stays in the memory of your browser. So if you see the screenshot here, there was already another student account that was used, and that stays, and you have to go back and clean that up later. If you use an incognito, you use it for the lab, and then it's done. Once you're done with your lab, there's, let's say, no garbage left behind. In Google Cloud itself, we'll have, and I'll show you a little overview of the console once I log in. We'll have the top left menu here. This is our navigation menu. This is how we'll be searching or selecting the products we'll be using in Google Cloud. And I'll show you in more details in a little bit. So with all that said, we should be ready to go in and click on Start Lab. This very first portion here, though, is done on Apigee. We will need some information from our Google Cloud. So you could potentially start the very first steps here just on Apigee, but eventually we'll need some information, and I'll show you in a little bit. When it comes to the credential portion, we need to have the information about our project already. So I'll go ahead and click on Start. And then we have our clock ticking there, but now I also have credentials. Let me go back a few steps here. And this is exactly what we'll be doing. First, let me go into this here. Oh, sorry, I meant to open this in another window. And copy my user. I'll also need the password. I just got out of my lab. 1 second, please. Password. We'll have to accept a few screens here. This is all the basic terms for Google Cloud. We don't need to update anything. Again, this account will be deleted. It does not use any of your own credentials, credits, or anything like that. It will be deleted once we're done with our lab. There should be maybe 1 or 2 more pop-ups that we need to acknowledge here. So this one, check on the I agree, and agree and continue. And while we'll be playing on Apigee, just in case, I'll just get our shell started here as well, just in case we need to use our Cloud Shell while it's spinning. Let's go back and look into our instructions again here. So we were into the create and configure stack driver extension. So this is on Apigee, right? So in the Apigee UI, we'll go to admin extensions and then add an extension. So there'll be admin extensions, and there you go. And up on the corner there, add extension. Typically, the Apigee UI will have the same format. Our options to create something on the context of the page where we are will have add buttons on the top right corner there. And we want to add an integration with Stackdriver. Just going back here, we're looking for Google Stackdriver logging. So Google Stackdriver logging, and that'll take us to just here, right? The name and the description, they don't really matter as much this time. Stack driver logging extension, for example, is as good as any other name. So let's use that. Stack driver logging extension. And if you haven't noticed yet, Stack driver is actually being renamed. It has recently changed it to Google Cloud Operations. We'll see that reflected on the console screen a little bit. So it's being created. We do need to select which environment we'll be using. So next step, once we click create, going down here on the screen, we are selecting the test environment, right? We need to expand, click on the little sign there to expand on the test environment. We need to make sure that we have the latest version. But then the other information we need here is our project ID. So I'll go ahead and copy already our GCP project ID that was generated for us, because I'll need that on the Apigee screen. So back into Apigee, go into test, and I have, let me see, this one. Make sure you're not playing with the top one there. Version project ID is the one that we selected. We're not using the import version. And then the other step that we need to do here, for the credentials, we'll have to swap the UI real quick here and go into the Google Cloud Console now, into the IAM and admin, to be able to get a service account that we can use. So we'll be creating a service account that Apigee can use. So just taking a quick pause here. This may be confusing, going back and forth on so many different windows and options here. Just to review what we've done so far. On Apigee, we started creating the configuration for what we call an extension. This is basically telling Apigee how to send login information into Google Cloud, right? So we have our project ID created in here. Credential is our next information that we need for us to be able to connect to Google Cloud. We don't have that yet, so let's go into Google Cloud. And, oh, that was on my other window here. And I'll go into IAM and admin and service accounts. So from here, we'll be creating a new service account, and that service account will need to give the right credentials to get to Stackdriver, basically. So if we scroll a little more down here, we'll go into create service account, and then we'll use service account name Apigee Stackdriver. And oh, sorry about that. Service account description, optional. You don't really need to do anything, but it's basically saying this is the account we use from Apigee to log into Stackdriver, and then click on create. The other information that we need is on the roles, and we want to make sure that we have logging and logs writer. From Apigee, we are pushing logs into Stackdriver. So let me switch screens here again, and I'll go back into my GCP console, and we'll be creating this service account called Apigee Stackdriver. So let me just copy this name from here. And the role will be logging and logs writer. That's the permission that we need to set. So in here, create new service account, account name, Stackdriver. Description is Apigee login account, for example. and create. And then the row, as we saw in the description there, you can type in logging and then logs writer. So that was the correct. For some reason, by typing logging, that wasn't coming up. So logging and then log writer. Continue. And we'll have to generate some credentials for us to be able to copy into Apigee. So after we're done here, we'll have to go and create a key for our newly created account. So back in there, let's complete the creation and let's click on done. So we should have our account. Let me close this here so we have some more space on the screen. We have our Stackdriver account created at the top here, but it shows no keys, right? And we want to create a key. So on the three dots on the actions column here, click on create key, and it'll be a JSON format key. Let's just go back here. So create to download your JSON output, and that JSON key we'll use to import into Apigee. So make sure JSON is selected, create, and that downloaded a file for me here. So that file is what I need to then open and copy its contents into Apigee. So let me click on close here, and actually let me bring that file over just so you see the contents of it. Just a simple text editor. This is what it looks like. So basically, JSON file, we actually have to take this content here and copy that into Apigee. So continuing on the instructions here, if you pay attention, we've switched it back into Apigee. And in there, where we were under credential, we'll basically paste the information for the service account we just created, and they'll then create or give the access for Apigee to be able to write logs into Stackdriver. So you should see that save green bar there. So from this perspective here, we should be done with configuring the Stackdriver. We'll be using this later on, not yet, not on the first steps on the lab. This is some basic setting up that we're doing right now for the for our environment, for our configuration. So back in Apigee, once you save, it wants us to click on the deploy. So let's do that. Now we have the deploy button. Let's do deploy. And while it's working on that, let's see what will be our next step here. We're expecting a green check mark there. So let's see if that's already in there. Not yet. And once that's good, we can check our progress here. So, and we should get a check mark once you're done with this step here. So we're validating that you've configured your service account and everything is connected already. Now switching gears a little bit, now it's where we truly start creating something on Apigee. Like I said, we'll be playing on the API proxy session of the UI. We'll go under develop and then API proxies, or if you're seeing this on your dashboard, just click on API proxies, it'll take you to the right place as well. From the list of proxies, we'll click on add proxy and we'll select a reverse proxy. This is our typical configuration where something from outside the company is trying to get into the company and it's going through what's then called a reverse proxy. This is used for when you already have a service on your backend or on your data center that you want to add a API layer in front. I'll just pause here for a moment. There's some information I'll be copying from here. So let's go back into Apigee. I have my green check mark there. So that's good. Like I said, you can click on develop and then API proxies. It'll take you to the list of proxies. Or if you are still on this screen here, you can simply click on API proxies. Either way, it'll get you to the right place, and then we'll click on add API proxy. We'll select a reverse proxy. Name is my proxy. Let's pay attention to some of the details here. They are important for us so we can then we'll know how to invoke our proxy. Base proxy, it will be auto-populated for you based on the proxy name, right? So we added proxy name as my proxy. Automatically the UI is adding / my proxy as the base path for your API. And then the other important information here is on existing API. You want to copy the URL that we have on the instructions there, and we'll paste that into the target or existing API. Description is optional. You can add something informative in there. For our lab, in my case, I'll leave it open, leave it clean, but you can add some description there if you want. If you were building a proxy here that eventually will be hitting production, you may consider to always have a decent description saying what the service is used for, maybe some other information, how to get to it, maybe a description about security mechanisms that may be used and other details about the service itself. This is internal, it's not for the user that will be consuming the API, but for your developer team, it's handy to be able to get some extra details to be able to differentiate different APIs. We'll click next, and on the next screen here, once we have the basic information, proxy name, and the backend URI, in the next page here, we'll make sure that for now, our security authorization or mechanism is set to pass through. We're not doing any security into this API yet, but we want to have add CORS header enabled. CORS is for when we are invoking the API from, let's say, a web application or from the browser. We have a link in here for more details. So if you're curious, we want to learn more about it, we have more information on what this means. For now, all you need to know is that automatically we'll be building this proxy, and whenever we send a response, we'll be sending the proper headers that are required for you to be able to invoke this proxy from basically different domains. We'll click next. And then where we'll be deploying these two, by default, we only have the secure check. It is the recommendation that everything that you build on HTTPS only. But in this case here, we are selecting default as well. We want to make sure that we support HTTPS and plain HTTP. And then later on, we'll select which environment we're deploying to, which is on our test environment. And then when we're done, we'll click on create and deploy. You automatically generate the configurations for the proxy for us and deploy the proxy. So basically, once we click on that create and deploy, our proxy will be live. It will already be taking ready to take traffic. So I'll click on next and select the test environment, create and deploy. You just spin for a few seconds and it's up and running, right? So if I go into my edit proxy, I can see what's being generated for me. If I look into here the URLs, there's this little plus sign here to expand. and I can see that we have HTTP as well as HTTPS that's been created for us. On the target endpoint, it shows us the proper backend API that we are invoking. There's some other information here for us, proxy endpoints, and this is where to call our API. We are on revision 1. This is the revision of the proxy deployed into Apigee, not the version of the API, not necessarily the version of the code either, just the revision on Apigee itself. So at this point here, like I was saying, our proxy is up and running. We are ready to invoke the API. And for that, if you did not prepare your tab with the REST client, or you can also call from the command line via curl, other tools like Postman, Postwoman, SOAP UI. There are a number of different tools that you can use to invoke this API. And what we'll be doing, we need to append this little portion here, factorial /12, to our whole API. And before that, I need to go into my client and be able to paste in the whole URL in there. So back into Apigee, let me copy this portion here. So this is the full URL that will get me to the proxy itself. And then we'll also append the factorial portion. So copy. Oh, did not take the slash there. So /factorial. Click on send. First thing here, it shows us status code 200. So this means it was a successful call. And on the body here, we have the response. Input 12, result, what's that? 400 million, right? Basically calculated the factorial of 12 for us. Simple API, not necessarily a, let's say, a business API necessarily, but it shows you how you can build something in front of a service that already exists. We have not done anything to this yet, right? We're not transforming, we're not doing anything fancy to this service here. We're basically added a layer in front and we're calling our service via that layer, via our own API management platform that's sitting in front of that service. So we should be at this point here now. Hopefully everybody was able to get to a 200. If for whatever reason you're trying to follow along and maybe I'm going too fast, you actually have the option to pause, complete the task, and then continue viewing the video. And the recording will also be available tomorrow, typically 24 hours after the session is done. So continuing here, our next step now will be to add some more policies, some more, let's say, features, some more functionality to the API that we already have. And this means that we'll be adding it to the API layer without making any changes to our existing service on the backend. We don't even have access to that service, right? We're just invoking it. We don't know how it's being written. Maybe it's Python, maybe it's Node.js, maybe it's something else. We don't know, right? It could be something in the mainframe if that was the case, right? So the idea here is that we don't need to make changes to the service that already exists. We don't need to, let's say, go back and bug our IT team saying, hey, I need you to add OAuth to my service because now my clients want to access my APIs via OAuth, right? We do that on the API layer, and you don't need to go back to that, let's say, demand in days and then the response from our backend infrastructure teams in years, for example, right? That's not the scenario here, because we can make these transformations, we can add these features directly on the API layer. So the few policies that we'll be adding here, there will be spike arrest, we add verify API key, and we add a quota as well to our APIs. These policies here, just a very brief introduction to what they do. Spike arrest helps us to prevent our platform and our backend from falling over in the event of, let's say, an increase in number of requests. So this increase could be, let's say we have a retail API and it's Black Friday, we were not ready for it, right? Maybe there is a promotion and we were not ready for the increased demand. We will prevent from generating extra load into the API platform and consequently into the backend as well. Also, another scenario will be denial of service types of attacks, right? So if we do get a large increase in number of requests, this spike arrest policy will start sending error messages back to the user. Only those that are over the limit that we specify in let's say the real request, the proper request, they are still allowed to go through into the backend. So the idea is that we can identify what is a good request and pass that over to the backend, and then the platform only has to handle, or the backend only has to handle, the legitimate requests, or if it's not in the event of an attack, only the ones that we have capacity to handle. Verify API key is just a way for us to identify who's invoking the API. It's very useful for us into the analytics in reporting. You can see exactly which applications are calling the API, but I don't see it necessarily as a security mechanism, because it's pretty much kind of like a password. Once that leaks, anyone that has that will be able to impersonate the same user by using the correct API key, right? We've seen this over and over. Somebody checks in the API key into GitHub, for example, right? So there are other techniques beyond the scope of this lab on what needs to be done to protect those keys, but just keep in mind that it's not necessarily a security feature. In a way, kind of it is, but it's more for us to identify who's invoking the API. Better than nothing for sure. And then the quota policy, it helps us to add some, let's say, business logic into our API without having to actually code that directly as code into the API. Quota you can specify, and we'll get to that in a little bit. You can create multiple products, so you can sell your API, let's say, in tiers. Maybe you can create a silver tier, silver product, gold product, and maybe a platinum, for example. And they all have different quotas in the number of requests that an application can make into that API in specific. We have a lot more information about all these policies in the documentation page. I'll show you a little trick from the UI on how to get to more information, but let's keep moving here. We'll be adding those APIs. For that, let me take another pause and just give a brief overview into the Apigee UI. You see here we have 4 areas. So if I switch very briefly here into Apigee, first thing we need to do is go into the Develop tab. So from the proxy view, let's say for some reason I got lost and I got out of where we were, or maybe I didn't click into edit my proxy when it was created. You can go back to the list of proxies and pick it from the list. It's called My Proxy, unless you named it something else. And from the overview, you can jump into the Develop tab. And then these are the 4 areas that we have. We have this bar on the left here. On the right for properties, the top here is where we see our flow diagram. And then the bottom is our text editor, where we see the code or the configuration for the portion of the proxy that we're working with. So the navigator panel on the left, number 2 here is what we call here the designer. This is our flow view where we can drag and drop policies into. Number 3 is our code. Number 4 is for properties on the right side. So if you remember, first policy we'll be adding, it will be a spike arrest. And for that, we need to select the right portion of our proxy. In Apigee, there are many different places where you can place your policy, for lack of a better word. And if we look in here, we have a default, not default, sorry, a proxy endpoint, and we have a target endpoint. Very briefly, again, we have more information about this on our documentation page. Proxy endpoint is everything that's close to our client. Target endpoint, we want to place policies that are more relevant to our backend. In this case, we want to cut off requests over the limit as soon as possible. So we'll select the proxy endpoint and the pre-flow. This is the very first thing to execute when we get the request. And then we'll click on add step. And then in here we have a list of policies available. There's maybe 50, close to 50 policies available here. You also have the block for extension, so you can create your own JavaScript code as needed. The extension callout that we configured earlier on, that's something that we'll be using later too. But for now, let's just pick a spike arrest policy. Typically, we want to change this name so you know what they're doing depending on the configuration. For now, we can just leave the name as is. And the other important information is that once we add, it comes with some pre-configurations. All policies, when they are added, they have already some details in them, like default information that's been configured in them. And we'll be changing that to the specs, let's say, that we need. And we'll be changing that to 2 per second. PS means per second. You also have the option to do PM, per minute. So let me take a step back here and go little by little so you can follow along. We are on the adding a policy. We can add it from here, right? So automatically we see that being displayed on our flow. Now we have a policy available in there. If it was the case like we have on the on Quick Labs, on the instructions there too, there's a little note block. You can also drag this policy elsewhere, right? Let's say we added on the wrong place. You can move it from this view here, or from the left side, from the list of policies, we can drag it into the desired location as well. Again, for the use of this policy here, we want it to execute as soon as possible. So proxy endpoint pre-flow, this is the correct location. We don't need to move it, but we do want to adjust the number of requests that we will allow, right? So the main field here, if I just zoom in, so you see here, rate, that's line 7 in the policy configuration. Right now it's 30 per second, and we want it to be 2 per second. And our documentation shows you exactly what that means. There is some, let's say, magic math calculation that happens. I'll let you look into the documentation for that one there. Just know that the idea for this policy is to avoid peaks in the number of requests, right? So if you have one request and another one coming in right after that, it may get declined, right? It doesn't mean that you can get 2 requests, or let's say let me see, the easy math that I usually use is if you do 1 per minute, you have, or 2 per minute, you have 1 request every 30 seconds, right? Even though we're configuring, let's say, 2 requests per minute, if I get 1 request and another one within, let's say, a few seconds, the second one will still be rejected even though it's within the minute. The idea is that we're spreading out the requests as they come. And again, the idea is to smooth the curve of the transactions, and that way we're spacing out the requests. We're giving time for the backend to be able to handle the load that's coming in and go back into a resting state before we send more requests to the backend. Another important thing that I did not call out is saving your proxy. Whenever we make changes here, so if I change this back, let's say to 20, my save button went blue again. That means that I have changes that have not been saved yet. So back into 2, save, and whenever the proxy is saved, it's automatically redeployed. So every change that we make here in the UI and we save it, it's up and live pretty much instantaneously. So let me keep going down here. We already added the policy. We played with moving it a little bit, and we set it to 2 per second, right? This is the number that we needed. Now we'll be adding the other 2 policies, and we'll be adding a verify API key policy. We'll be adding a quota policy as well. So let me add those 2 policies, and in the quota, as well as in the API key, I'll show you the configuration that they come with. But first, let's select the same flow, proxy endpoint, pre-flow, and we'll add, now it's going to be under security. We'll look for verify API key and just click on add. And then we'll also add a quota policy, which is under traffic management, the very first policy here in the list. So now we have 2 more policies. Let me save here. I'll switch back into the instructions. Our proxy is looking just like what we have here, right? So we're leaving the names as is. We don't need to change them for now. But we will change the contents of the quota policy. So let's copy this portion here. This is for the quota policy. And this is going to tell us where to get the quota from, basically. So go back into our Apigee window again, go into the quota, and what I'll do is just select all and paste the contents from before. And if you have eagle eyes here, you're going to notice that we are referencing the verify API key policy, verify API key 1, which is exactly the default name for our policy here. And this means that when we get into our next step, we'll be configuring our quota information into the product. So if you see here, there's an API product value in the list here. So we have a breakdown of the configurations in the product itself, but we also have some default values. So if you look into here, the 2000 and then 1 month, if we don't have these values configured in our product, we'll be then defaulting back to 2000 requests per month. This is our limit for whoever is calling this API without any configuration in the product. And we'll get to that in a second. Don't worry if I'm kind of covering things ahead of time here. And then one more thing that we need to do is, let me double check. So now that we've changed our quota, we'll edit our course policy, which is already there in the proxy, to allow a new header. Right? So we'll be adding API key as a new header that can be passed in. Simply select the policy, go into the XML configuration, and add API key to it. So into Apigee, we'll be selecting our course policy here. So Different ways that we can get to this window here. I just clicked under policies and add course. If we were back on our previous view here, we can go where that policy lives. It is on the pre-flow for the target endpoint. So this is how we place different place policies in different locations in our proxy. So if you go into the target side and select pre-flow, you see the policy displayed there on the diagram, and you can select the policy from there, and then you have the XML configuration. Or like I did from where we were, just click on the policy directly, and you have your policy configuration. So what we need to add here is comma API key. This is under the allow headers, and this will be the configuration or a new header that will be passing in when we call the API. So right now, when we invoked it, we simply invoked the API as is when we did the factorial /12. We didn't have to pass any extra information to our API when we got a result. But due to the change that we're making now, we'll be having to pass now by adding the verify API key policy. We now have to pass a key for our API to work. And then one more thing that will be changing here is on our proxy endpoints pre-flow, we'll be adding the extension callout. And to do that, again, just another reminder to save your proxy. In general, I like to save almost for every change that I make, just to be on the safe side. But we do have a little reminder here that you have to save your proxy. Next policy we'll be adding is the extension callout. And they'll go, again, proxy side and pre-flow. And then we'll be adding via the add step. So let's go. Proxy pre-flow, add step. And we'll scroll all the way to the bottom on this list of policies here, and then click on extension callout. And let's see if we're changing the name here. We're leaving the name, display name as it is. We just need to make sure that we are picking our extension, right? We created this already in our first step. We just need to use the drop down here to select it. This is the only option that's there. And action, this is the only action that this extension does. Depending on which extension you're using, there could be different actions in here. For the logging, that's all it does. It's just generate logs into Stackdriver. And click on add. And we should see a new policy in our flow there. We'll be modifying that policy slightly. So under the input configuration, we'll need to get our project ID for our GCP project, which is down here on the screen still. But let's copy this portion here first. This will be under the input tag or configuration in the XML, and then we'll replace project ID. For that, we need to select our policy. It's already selected in here, and we are replacing just this portion here, just the input portion. So I should already have in my clipboard here the correct configuration. So this is what's looking like now, and here is where I'll add my project ID. So let me go back. Now I'll copy my GCP project ID and back into Apigee, and let's paste it right there. So in my case, this is what it is. Yours obviously will be different. So make sure that you do add the correct project ID in here. And now is a good time to save this. Now, next step, we'll be creating a product. And if you recall, this is how we package and publish APIs on Apigee. Like I was saying, you could, for example, have multiple products for, let's say, silver, gold, platinum types of tiers. And this is what the products mean. The configuration is done under the publish section in the UI. So let's switch into publish, and then we'll go to API products, and we'll be creating a new product with this configuration here, right? So if you recall, we need to add some quota information, and then we'll link our product to our proxy. At a very, very high level, a product is nothing more than, let's say, us packaging the proxies or the APIs for them to be consumed by our end users. Let me just copy this here. This is the name of the product, display name, my API product, environment tests, access public, and I'll go through these options here in the UI. So let's switch gears here to publish. Make sure it is saved, right? If you have not saved your changes yet, make sure you save them, or you risk losing your configurations. So go to publish and then API products. And we'll be adding a new product. So product name, my API product, my API. For example, we want it test. Access, this is only about the whether it's visible or not in the developer portal. We don't really have a portal configure linked to this test organization here. So it truly doesn't matter what we select here. We can select public, for example. But then the quota is important. And the quota information that we have, it's 5 per minute. So 5 requests every 1 minute. And I'll get back to the option that I just skipped there too. So let me do this here. 5 every 1 and then minute. This one on the top here, if you have this checked, whenever a new application adds this product, they'll get their approval automatically. Let's say you have maybe some sensitive data that you want to control which applications have data to that API, have access to that API. You have to uncheck this here, and this makes the approval process manual. Manual in the sense that you have to come back in and approve it. Doesn't have to be truly manual in the sense of a person coming back to the UI and check the checkbox. That is an option. But you could integrate into your own, let's say, workflow, the approval to this product via Apigee's own management APIs. So everything that we do on the UI here can also be automated, can be done via APIs, via what we call management APIs. Back into our steps, the next main important thing that we need to do here, if you remember, product is a packaging of APIs, of proxies, so we need to link this product into a proxy. And the one that we want is my proxy. We're doing the whole proxy. You do have other options. It could be a portion of a proxy only if you use one of the two options here, right? Or if you don't know which proxy, you can go by path if you want to organize it that way. Independent of which proxies are handling the specific paths, you can select by path, or you can select subpaths inside a specific proxy, right? Those are more advanced options. We have a simple scenario here. We'll add just the API proxy as a whole, and we need to make sure that we're selecting my proxy, which is the name of our proxy, and then add, which then brings it up to the list here, right? If you wanted to remove, you can click on the X icon there. You can come back, you can edit this product here. You can add more proxies later on if you needed to. And that should be it for now. We can just double check, click on add, and then we'll click on save, right? So when we save, we should already have our product created. And the next step here will be to create an application. Click on save. So our product is good to go. We don't have anybody using this yet. So let's go in and create our own application. So we have the option of creating applications from this UI here. This is what we call our management UI, the same way that we call the APIs, internal APIs, management APIs. This is for our admin, right? So whenever you're building APIs, you will want to test them internally before you make them available to your own users or external developers. And most likely they will be creating their applications via a developer portal. But in our case, we'll be creating an internal app via this portion of the UI here under Publish Apps. And we'll be creating an app and then selecting the product that we just created. So for that, the app will be very creatively called My App. And the only other thing we need to do here is select the application, right? So going down a little bit here, you see that we have My API product selected down here. And we'll use the developer that's already been created. But ideally, let's say if this was real scenario, your developers, they'll be creating their accounts via the portal, and you can select different developers in here. We already have one that's been created here by default when we created the test account, the trial account on Apigee. We don't need callback. This is for OAuth scenarios only. We don't really need to add any nodes. You don't need to make any expirations right now. You do have the option. Only other important configuration here is my adding the product, my API product. Add one. So since we had the checkbox there checked, it's automatically approved. And the only other thing we need to do now is click on Create. And here under Credentials, we now have a key that's been generated for us. Make note of this key here. We'll be using this to invoke our API. And Secret is also available if we were to come back and add OAuth to this API as the, let's say, the real security mechanism, then we would also need to use the secret in order to call the API. For API key, we're just doing a basic validation on whether this key exists and whether this application has access to the proxy in question, right? So it has to be approved and the product needs to contain the proxy in it. So let me come back in here. And we'll test our API. The way to test it will be the same as before, right? We have our URL with the factorial/12, and we'll be using the same tool as before. So I'm going back to our Apigee REST client here. But notice that I need to pass in a parameter, right? And I'll show you why this is going on the URL for now. And then I'll show you what we'll have to change in a little bit, because we did, this is not part of the lab, by the way, it's just like a bonus information, but I'll cover that in a little. So let's get into our test tool and let's invoke the API. So from here, right? So if I call this the way it is right now, we'll be getting an error. So this is 4.1, it's being blocked by our API key policy. And if you look at the default message that we send back here, it tells us that it's expecting as a query parameter. And that's why we need to come back in here and do API key equal, and then I'll have to copy my key that's being generated. In your case, you'll be using your own key. Otherwise, you'll not know the key that's being used. Make sure that when you copy, you're not passing in any extra spaces either in front or after, because that could mess it up. So if I send this again, this should come back as a 200. Let's see, demo gods on my side, 200. There you go. Same result as before, right? We're passing 12 and factorial of 12 supposedly is that number. I'll trust it. We can test it. Let's say factorial of maybe 3. I can do that one by hand. There you go. So we tested our API. We tested our verify API key validation here. But what I was saying, this is coming on the URL. And now I'll just take this little sidebar here before I get into the next portion of the lab. If we wanted to send this key, right, in the header, if you recall, we've made a change to the course policy to allow a header called API key, right? But if I call it this way, we'll get the same 401 as before because we're expecting the key to go into the query parameter. But now if I go back on Apigee and back into my proxy, develop, and then API proxy, go into the develop tab, and the error message or the validation itself is coming from the verify API key, and here we have it, right? So if you want to get this from a header, we just replace this with header.api key and save. And let's try again and see what happens. I have my API key, my correct value, and let me call this from here. And 200, voila. So now we have a better API because we're not exposing our key on the URL. If you know a little bit of about internet, our URL here, it can be stored anywhere along the way, right? It could even be cached in my browser. So if I were to place this here on the address bar, let's say I include my API key again on the URL, if I revert my change to get the key from the URL as a query parameter, that could be even bookmarked into my browser, right? So never place sensitive information like a key. Like I said, it's like a password. Treat it as a password. It should not be on the URL. On the lab here, this is just for us to learn how the tool works. No harm, but just keep that in mind if you're building something that's supposed to be in production. Protect your API, protect your platform by protecting the keys and how to get to the APIs. Just a little sidebar on this topic here. Now, continuing, if we switch gears and we go look into our GCP console now, if you recall, we added our logging policy in our proxy. So in theory, this proxy has been logging our requests, right? And we pasted a big block of XML in there in the logging extension policy. I did not get into the details, but let's take a look at, let's take a look at our logs and see what's being generated. And for that, we'll go into our navigation here, the hamburger menu, if you want to call it that, the 3 lines. You can scroll down here until you get to operations and then logging, or on the search, you can go in and type in logging and you get us to the same place. So right now we don't see anything here. We need to add our filters to be able to see what we're logging, right? So we'll go to operations, logging, logs viewer, or just type in the search bar logging, and then on the drop down, if we select global, then we should start seeing some logs. So let's see if that's the case. So go to global, and that should be showing us everything. So there you go. So if we just zoom in a little bit, That's all that we are logging. API proxy executed successfully. And one entry for every time that I called my proxy. And now, if we just check the progress here on Quick Labs, we should get a green check. And just to kind of close the loop in here, if we go back into Apigee and we click on this policy that we added, if you look into this line here, message, this is truly what we're seeing there, right? The beauty of Apigee is that you can log in anything, right? So if you wanted, for example, to log in maybe parameters that were passed into our API, all you need to do is reference those parameters in here. As part of this message, you can reference different variables in Apigee. You can add maybe the headers, maybe the body of the request or the verb that was used. Anything that's available on the platform, you can log into, in this case, Stackdriver, simply by changing what's the message that's being logged to Stackdriver. Just be careful not to add sensitive information. Again, the same point that I've made before on the API key. Exactly the same thing. Make sure that you're not logging in passwords, API keys, credit card information, or any other PII type of information, anything that's sensitive. Make sure that you don't log, or you hash it before you log if you need to do it that way, right? So you log it in a protected manner. We do have one optional for review analytics. I believe we do have a couple minutes here. And all that it is in Apigee itself, if you go into our analyze option and you explore the reports, you should start seeing some of the requests that we made. So we haven't made enough requests yet, just a few, but you see some graphs here already showing you things like number of requests and then response time, right? There are other things for maybe error codes. We've made some requests that generated 401, if you recall. Let's just make sure this is the correct one. We should see some information about that here. So 401, we've had two requests here with 401s. Latency analysis, how long is it taking for us to send responses? We don't have the data in here yet, or maybe I need to select the proxy. Let's see if that's pretty. Not yet available in here. Sometimes it does take a little bit, but it is showing us what looks like 42 milliseconds will be our response time so far, which is not bad at all. But also target performance, right? It shows us which target we're using, what is the IP address. If we had many servers, it will show you exactly which ones are behaving, let's say, badly. Should you maybe, let's say, if you were troubleshooting something, right? And there are many other reports here, right? So if we were to see maybe by which application, right? We only have one application, one product, but you can see here which application that's invoking, which products and developers. There's lots of different breakdowns. They're available basically out of the box. There's a cool one here that shows you a map of where the requests are coming from. In this case here is all from the US. I am based in the US. And it's showing me Virginia. I'm not in Virginia, but the data center that I'm connected to right now is in Virginia. So this is coming from our US East location here. But if you had multiple users to your API, you'll be seeing exactly the location. Or if it was not from US only, you'd see the world map here, and you'll be able to kind of pinpoint where the requests are coming from. There are lots of cool information here, well beyond the scope of this session today. Hopefully it was good. This pretty much concludes our lab here. And when you click on your end lab, you should earn a badge. So congratulations. We do have other labs and more information about training, certification also that you can explore more. Don't forget to click on end your lab so you get your badge. So just to close this off here, a couple more things that I have here to cover. The lab, like I mentioned before, is part of a quest. It's 6 labs total. Make sure you complete them all so you collect your badges, not only for the badge itself, but also for the knowledge that you gain. And if you're competitive, you could be at the top of our leaderboard as well. All right. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this session. We have more coming up, so stick around. This quest is comprised of 6 labs. Make sure to complete them all to gain knowledge and maybe even win prizes. Don't forget to revisit the past sessions from all of the weeks so far, and I look forward to building cool things with you in the future.